Many believe that in the wild, every living creature knows its fate with certainty, guided unerringly through the merciless cycle of life and death. That might be a comforting illusion, but it was not the truth for Lyra, the grey she-wolf whose life was about to become a direct refutation of that rule. High in the snow-laden valleys of the northern Rocky Mountains, where towering pines clung stubbornly to rocky slopes and the air was thick with the scent of resin and frost, Lyra, a strong-spirited she-wolf, tended to her 3 newborn pups. Her den, a hollow hidden beneath the gnarled roots of an ancient tree, offered only meager shelter from the piercing winds that howled through the passes. Around 4 or 5 years old, Lyra was in her prime, her sturdy, muscular frame clad in a thick pelt that bore witness to many successful hunts and hardships endured. Her coat was a striking blend of coal-black, silver, and reddish hues that blended seamlessly with the harsh terrain. Her amber eyes, sharp and unyielding, shone with both ancestral wisdom and fierce maternal vigilance. Every movement she made was fluid, silent, and precise. She was the embodiment of wild strength and grace, yet even such an accomplished huntress could not foresee what was coming. This early winter was unusually unforgiving, the forerunner of a season of unprecedented brutality. Frost locked the earth more quickly than usual, and snow that normally blanketed the peaks softly now fell with a relentless heaviness, promising long months of scarcity. Lyra scanned the frozen expanse constantly, every nerve attuned to whispers of danger and fleeting chances of prey. She disliked this cold, this early chill that felt not just like winter, but like the omen of something deeper and far more merciless. The air itself trembled with tension, foreshadowing trials to come. She often checked her pups, inhaling their warm, milky scent, reassuring herself that they were safe and that their tiny bodies were kept warm. It was her foremost task, her only purpose at that moment. With each passing day, hunting grew harder. Deer, usually grazing at these altitudes, had already moved to lower ground to escape the advancing cold and deepening snow. Hares, once an easy target, had become scarce, and even the smallest rodents had burrowed deep underground, beyond her reach. Lyra spent precious energy on increasingly fruitless chases, her powerful paws leaving deep impressions in the fresh snow. Every failed attempt, every fading trail weighed on her not only with exhaustion, but with a gnawing dread. She could feel her ribs beginning to show through her thick coat, her once strong body succumbing to weakness. But her maternal instinct, fierce and unrelenting, drove her onward. She was not merely a hunter, she was a protector, a provider. Her tiny, still blind, helpless pups depended entirely on her, their frail cries a constant reminder of the crushing burden she bore. She imagined their small, fuzzy bodies huddled together in the dark den. And that image alone gave her the strength to keep going, even as despair crept closer. Sometimes, returning empty-jawed, she licked her pups tenderly, trying to offer them some fragment of warmth and hope, though her own strength dwindled. Her milk began to fade, and she knew that without sustenance, she could not keep feeding them. It was nature's cruel arithmetic, survival to the strongest, but here survival of the weak rested on the strength of their mother. Then came the blizzard, a monstrous, untimely storm rushing down from the Arctic with terrifying speed. It was not a snowfall, but a true white fury, transforming the familiar world into a shattered wasteland within hours. Snow fell mercilessly, burying the land under a suffocating shroud and turning once passable trails into deadly drifts. The wind shrieked like a banshee, tearing branches from trees and sculpting lethal dunes of snow that swallowed everything in their path. The temperature plummeted, and the air cut like knives with every breath. Lyra, who had tried once more to venture out for a final desperate hunt, was driven back. Frost clung to her pelt, her paws sinking heavily into the deepening snow. With effort, she returned to her den, frost seeping into her very bones. What had once been a refuge had become an icy prison, its entrance almost sealed over, trapping her and her fragile brood inside. Outside, the storm raged with a fury that felt personal, as though it had come for them alone. Inside, the cold deepened, and even pressed against her warmth, the pups began to shiver. Lyra pulled them close, her own body the last shield against the freezing air. She dug desperately at the frozen earth and packed snow, trying to carve a way out, but her every attempt was futile. The storm replenished every tunnel as soon as it was made. It was as though the whole world had conspired against them. In this desolate expanse of snow, cut off from all hope, Lyra and her pups lay trapped, their fate hanging by a thread. History offers countless examples of nature's overwhelming might. Armies destroyed in the Russian snows, expeditions lost to the merciless polar ice. The ancient Celts, for instance, understood this well, worshipping the harsh gods of winter whose whims brought either survival or ruin, long before meteorology ever tried to tame the heavens. Ancient Celts, for instance, understood this well, worshipping the stern deities of winter whose whims could bring both mercy and destruction, long before meteorology attempted to tame the heavens. Inside the frozen womb of the den, time ceased to be a measure of hours and became a relentless grind of diminishing returns. Lyra's breath plumed in the frigid air, each exhalation a cloud of fading warmth. The initial panic of being sealed in had given way to a dull, throbbing ache that permeated her entire being. Her attempts to dig out were not just futile, they were physically devastating. She would claw at the hardened snow, her powerful forelegs scraping against frozen earth and compacted ice, until her paws were raw and bleeding, the pain a distant echo to the greater agony of her empty stomach and the weakening cries of her pups. Each time she retreated, defeated, the snow outside seemed to mock her, piling higher, denser, an impenetrable white wall. Her mind, usually a sharp instrument of survival, began to blur at the edges. Memories of sun-drenched summers, of the exhilarating chase across open plains, of the rich taste of fresh kill, flickered like dying embers. She recalled the playful nips of her mate, Orion, his strong presence a comforting anchor in their small pack. He had been a magnificent wolf, his coat darker than hers, his howl a deep resonance that echoed through the valleys. They had shared many seasons, many hunts, and the joy of previous litters. But Orion had fallen to a hunter's snare last spring, leaving Lyra to face this new challenge alone, a widow in a world that offered no quarter. This current litter, her third, was meant to be a testament to her enduring strength, a continuation of their line. Now it felt like a tragic finale. The pups, initially a vibrant, squirming mass of life, were losing their luster. Their tiny bodies, once plump with her rich milk, were now alarmingly thin. Lyra would nudge them, her nose brushing against their soft fur, trying to stimulate a response, a renewed suckling. But the flow of milk from her teats was now a mere trickle, watery and insufficient. The smallest, a male Lyra had mentally named Rune for his delicate, almost ethereal appearance, was the most concerning. His whimpers were the faintest, his movements the most sluggish. He barely responded to her touch, his tiny head lolling listlessly. Lyra would spend hours just licking him, trying to impart warmth, to soothe him with the rough comfort of her tongue, a desperate ritual against the encroaching cold and hunger. The air in the den grew stale, heavy with the scent of fear, damp earth, and the faint, sweet smell of sickliness from the weakening pups. The cold was a constant, insidious presence, seeping into their bones, stealing their vitality with every passing minute. Lyra's own body, once a furnace of maternal warmth, was now a fragile shield, losing its battle against the elements. She shivered uncontrollably, her muscles spasming, yet she held her position, curled tightly around her precious cargo, a living barricade against the inevitable. Outside, the world was a maelstrom. The blizzard wasn't just a storm, it was an entity, a roaring, blinding force that redefined the landscape. Snow fell not in flakes, but in horizontal sheets, driven by winds that could strip bark from trees and scour rock faces bare. The familiar towering pines, usually steadfast sentinels, swayed and groaned like tortured giants, their branches snapping under the immense weight of snow and ice. Visibility was zero, a swirling vortex of white that obliterated all sense of direction, depth, and time. Even the hardiest creatures of the Rockies had sought refuge, burrowing deep, hunkering down, or migrating to lower, more hospitable climes. The silence, when the wind momentarily lulled, was more terrifying than the roar. An oppressive, absolute stillness that spoke of a world paused, waiting for death. Miles away, in a small, meticulously crafted cabin nestled on the edge of a frozen lake, Elias Thorne followed his own solitary rituals. Elias was a man carved from the very landscape he inhabited, At 60, his face was a tapestry of wrinkles, each line a testament to sun, wind, and the countless stories held within the silent forests. His beard, a cascade of pure white, blended with the snow-covered world outside his window, while his eyes, a startlingly clear blue, held the depth and quiet intensity of ancient glacial lakes. He was not a hermit by misanthropy, but by choice, a deep, abiding preference for the company of trees and wildlife over the clamor of human society. He had come to these mountains as a young man, a veteran of a forgotten war, seeking not to escape, but to find something he couldn't name in the quiet solitude. He had built his cabin with his own hands, learned the rhythms of the land, and became a tracker and woodsman of unparalleled skill. His knowledge of the local fauna, especially the wolves, was encyclopedic, gleaned from years of patient observation, not from books. He knew their territories, their hunting patterns, their denning sites, all from respectful distance, never interfering, always learning. His days were a symphony of simple, purposeful tasks: chopping wood, mending traps for small game, never predators, checking his snowshoe trails, reading the signs left by animals in the snow. His philosophy was a simple, profound one: respect the wilderness, live within its means, and never presume to improve upon its design. Nature, in his view, was a perfect, if brutal, system of checks and balances. He had witnessed countless tragedies, the weak falling to the strong, the young succumbing to the harshness of winter, and had always accepted them as part of the grand, indifferent cycle. To intervene, he believed, was to disrupt this delicate balance, to play God where man had no place. His cabin, though Spartan, was a sanctuary of warmth and order, a stark contrast to the chaos outside. A small, crackling fire in the stone hearth cast dancing shadows on walls adorned with carefully dried herbs, maps, and a few well-worn tools. A pot of stew simmered gently, its aroma a comforting counterpoint to the howling wind. Yet on the 5th day of the blizzard, as the storm showed no signs of abating, an unfamiliar disquiet settled upon Elias. It wasn't the usual concern for his own safety or supplies. He was well prepared for such conditions. It was a subtle, persistent tug, like a distant echo in his soul. Days before the storm, he had spotted a lone wolf track, heading towards the high denning grounds. It was an unusual time for a wolf to be so high up, especially a solitary one. He'd noted it, filed it away, but now the image of that single track, partially obscured by the first dusting of snow, kept returning to him. He knew the high denning grounds were treacherous in a normal winter, let alone in a blizzard of this magnitude. He tried to dismiss it as an old man's fancy, a trick of the isolation, but the feeling persisted, growing stronger, an insistent whisper against the roar of the wind. It was a premonition he couldn't explain, a deviation from his usual stoic acceptance of nature's course. His rational mind argued against it. It's folly, Elias. No man should be out in this, and what good could you do? It's the way of things. But his intuition, honed by a lifetime of living close to the earth, spoke louder. It was a faint, almost imperceptible hum, a sense of urgency that transcended logic. He knew the wolves, knew their resilience, but he also knew the absolute, unforgiving power of a storm like this. Against his better judgment and the very real threat of freezing to death or becoming disoriented in the whiteout, Elias began to prepare. He donned his heaviest woolens, thick leather gloves, and a fur-lined parka that had seen decades of service. He strapped on his snowshoes, their wooden frames and rawhide webbing familiar extensions of his feet. He packed a small rucksack, a thermos of hot tea, a block of pemmican, a small hatchet, and a length of rope. As he stepped out of his cabin, the blizzard hit him with a physical force, snatching his breath away. The air was thick with ice crystals, stinging his exposed skin. The world was a blinding, roaring, white void. He bent into the wind, relying on instinct and memory, following an old trapper's trail that he knew led vaguely in the direction of the wolf territories, a path long abandoned by others but etched into his mind. Each step was an immense effort, his snowshoes sinking deep into the drifts, his muscles screaming in protest. The cold bit through his layers, a relentless gnawing pain. He pushed on, driven by that inexplicable pull, a silent promise to himself that he would at least investigate, if only to lay his own unease to rest. He stumbled, fell, picked himself up, his determination a fierce, solitary flame against the vast indifference of the storm. After what felt like an eternity, but was likely several hours of grueling travel, Elias found himself in a part of the forest he knew well, even if it was unrecognizable under its shroud of snow. He squinted, trying to discern landmarks through the swirling white. And then he saw it. A subtle irregularity in the snowdrift, a slight mound where there should have been a smooth slope. It was almost completely buried, but something about its shape, its faint indentation, triggered a memory of a wolf den he had observed years ago. He approached cautiously, his senses heightened, his heart thrumming not with fear, but with a strange mix of anticipation and dread. As he drew closer, the wind momentarily shifted, and he heard it, a faint, desperate whimpering, almost swallowed by the storm, but unmistakably the sound of young animals in distress. He cleared away the snow from the nearly buried entrance, his movements slow and deliberate, not wanting to startle whatever lay within. As he peered inside, the sight that met him was stark, brutal, and utterly heartbreaking. A gaunt wolf, her once magnificent coat matted and dull, lay curled tightly around 3 shivering, dying pups. Her amber eyes, though sunken and glazed with exhaustion, held a raw, agonizing despair that pierced through Elias's hardened resolve. It was a look he had rarely seen in the wild, a surrender to the inevitable, a profound grief that transcended species. He was faced with a profound moral dilemma, a clash between his lifelong principles and the raw, undeniable evidence of suffering before him. To intervene was to meddle with nature, to violate the very code he lived by. He had always believed that the strong survived, the weak perished, and that was the harsh, immutable law of the wilderness. But the fragility of those tiny lives, the utter defeat in Lyra's eyes, shattered his stoicism. His humanity, his deep-seated respect for life, for the fierce, unyielding will of a mother, compelled him to act. It wasn't about saving a species or even an individual, but about responding to a primal cry for help that resonated deep within his own compassionate heart. The thought of walking away, of leaving them to their slow, agonizing demise, was suddenly unbearable. Elias acted quickly, but with a cautious respect that spoke volumes of his understanding of wild creatures. He didn't approach too closely, maintaining a safe distance, allowing Lyra to observe him without feeling immediately threatened. He began to clear more snow from the den's entrance, widening the opening, allowing fresh, albeit cold, air to circulate. He worked slowly, deliberately, his movements devoid of any suddenness that might provoke an attack from the desperate mother. Lyra, weakened but still alert, watched him with wary, intelligent eyes, her body tensed, ready to defend her pups even in her depleted state. Her instincts screamed danger, warned her of the 2-legged predator, but the gnawing hunger in her belly, the desperate need of her pups, and the man's careful, non-threatening demeanor created a fragile crack in her defenses. Elias then carefully placed a piece of dried venison, which he carried for emergencies, just within reach of the den's opening. He then retreated a short distance, melting back into the swirling snow, but remaining visible, allowing her space and time. The internal battle within Lyra was agonizing. Every fiber of her being screamed danger. The scent of man, though muted by the cold, was a potent warning. Yet the smell of the venison, rich and tantalizing, was an even more powerful lure. Her pups stirred weakly, their faint whimpers a constant reminder of their dire need. She eyed the meat, then the retreating human figure, her mind racing. The man had made no aggressive move, had not approached her den directly, had even cleared the snow, offering an escape. It was an unprecedented act. Finally, the primal hunger for her pups overcame her ingrained fear. With a low growl of warning, more a rumble of exhaustion than aggression, she stretched her neck, nudged the venison towards her pups with her nose, then tore off a piece for herself, swallowing it ravenously. It was the first nourishment in days, a meager but life-sustaining offering. A fragile trust, born of desperation and an unexpected act of kindness, had been forged in the heart of the blizzard. Over the next few days, as the blizzard gradually subsided, its fury giving way to a biting but clear cold, Elias continued his discreet vigil. He returned to the den twice daily, leaving small offerings of food, more venison, a freshly caught rabbit he'd managed to snare near his cabin, even some dried fish, always placing them just outside the entrance and retreating before Lyra could fully register his presence. He also cleared away fallen branches and fresh snow, ensuring easier access and better ventilation for the den, making it a more hospitable, less suffocating space. He never tried to make eye contact, never spoke, never made a sudden move. His presence was a quiet, consistent intervention, a lifeline thrown into the abyss. Slowly, painstakingly, Lyra and her pups began to recover. The consistent, life-giving sustenance, combined with the slightly improved conditions in the den, brought them back from the brink. Lyra's ribs remained prominent, but her strength gradually returned. Her milk, stimulated by the nourishment, began to flow more freely, bringing renewed life to her starving offspring. The pups, once listless and cold, started to stir with renewed vigor. The smallest pup, Rune, who Elias had almost given up for lost, began to move more purposefully, his tiny tail wagging weakly when Lyra nudged him. Their cries grew stronger, no longer faint whimpers of despair, but insistent demands for food and warmth. Elias, observing from a distance with his binoculars, felt a profound, quiet satisfaction. He saw Lyra grooming her pups with renewed energy, her amber eyes regaining their sharp intelligence, though a flicker of wariness remained whenever he was near. He even saw the pups, their eyes now fully open, tentatively exploring the den's entrance, their small paws batting at the snow. As spring tentatively touched the thawing land, painting the world in shades of pale green and brown, Lyra and her now strong, playful pups emerged from the den, ready to face the world. They were leaner, scarred by their ordeal, but alive, vibrant, and full of the boundless energy of youth. Lyra had taught them to hunt small rodents near the den, to recognize the scent of danger, and to respect the vastness of their world. One morning, as the sun climbed above the eastern peaks, casting long golden shadows across the valley, Lyra led her family away. She paused at the mouth of the den, turning her head slightly towards the distant rise where Elias often watched. For a moment, their eyes met across the vast expanse. It was not a gaze of fear, nor of overt gratitude, but a silent acknowledgement, a shared understanding that transcended the boundaries of species. Then, with a flick of her tail, she turned and led her pups deeper into the vast wilderness, leaving behind the den and the silent, watchful presence of Elias. He stood at a distance, observing their departure until they were mere specks against the towering pines, a profound sense of peace settling over him. He had intervened, defied the cold logic of nature, and in doing so had witnessed a miracle. The experience left an indelible mark on Elias, a quiet understanding of the interconnectedness of all life, and the enduring power of compassion in a world often defined by its cruelty. He had seen the raw, unyielding will to survive, and had chosen to extend a hand of unexpected grace. He knew that his act would forever remain a secret shared only with the mountains and the wolves. A quiet testament to a moment when the boundaries between man and wild blurred, and a life was saved against all odds. It was a lesson he would carry with him, a reminder that even in the most brutal of landscapes, a flicker of hope, born of empathy, could ignite the flame of life anew.